We started Tanya 2 Sundays ago. We started Tanya. And as I explained to you at length, relative length at least, the Alter Rebbe decides to reach the pnimius, that means the definitions that he's interested in the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, by going from the Nigla to the Nister. He doesn't start off with the Nister, he starts off with the Nigla. Now, Hashgacha Pratis, more than Hashgacha Pratis, I actually opened up a Zohar and I looked inside. Berayim Hem the Pashas Mishpatim that Alter Rebbe quotes on the first page. It's a whole page of Zohar, it's a whole Amud of Zohar. And the Amud of Zohar is very similar, at least in part, to the Gemara in Brachas, Sabat Tzadikim, Benyanim, and Rishoyim. And if I was completely thorough in my understanding of that Zohar, I would have literally brought it in and learned it with you. I'm not comfortable that I can come in here with a page of Zohar and read it to you and translate it to you in a way that would be lucid and coherent. But there's no other way to explain the Zohar. In other words, when you read that page of Zohar, it's not just 5 words. Alter Rebbe quotes 5 words of a Zohar. It says in Ayim, the Pashas Mishpatim, Tzadik V'Rale, Sharash Abei, Kafaf Latev. That's the whole quote. In fact, it doesn't say the Lashon Kafaf and Zayz, it's a different expression. But there's no other way to explain the Zohar. So there is a source in Zohar, which is of course Pnimiyas HaTorah, the Seiges of Torah, the secrets of Torah, for the definitions of Tzadik Ben Yirasha, which our Tanya, which is Sefer L'Kutei Amorim, is discussing. But like I'm saying to you, the Alter Rebbe does not want to begin with the Nister. He starts Dafka with the Gemara. He starts Dafka with the Nigla. This is the Alter Rebbe's approach. It goes from the Nigla to the Nister. So what is the Nigla? The Nigla is a number of Gemaras. Okay? The first Gemara isn't even cited by name. It's a non-mentioned Gemara. You know why it's not cited by name? Because it's all over the Shas. It's repeated over and over and over again. What is the Hine Metzinu b'Gemara Heichalukis Tzadik v'Tevle, Tzadik v'Rale, Rosh v'Tevle, Rosh v'Rale, Yobenyani. That's what the Gemara. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe doesn't even explain to you what these Gemaras mean. He doesn't tell you where these Gemaras are because they're all over the Shas. Okay, what are these definitions? Tzadik v'Tevle, Tzadik v'Rale, Rosh v'Tevle, Rosh v'Rale, Yobenyani. So we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to repeat it right now. I remember being in Cheder, my first Tanya Malam with Rabbi Yossi Goldstein. Tzadik v'Tevle, a tzadik was to em is good. A tzadik who has it good. Tzadik v'Rale, a tzadik was to em is schlecht. A tzadik who has it bad. Rasha v'Tevle means a Rasha was to em is good. A Rasha who has it good. And Rasha v'Rale means a Rasha who has it bad. What does that mean? Simple, plain. What does it mean? Tzadik v'Tevle means tzadik who has a good life materially. Tzadik v'Rale is a tzadik who has a bad life materially. That's a tight of words. Rasha v'Tevle means a Rasha who has a good life materially, and Rasha v'Rale means a Rasha who has a bad life materially. Now, you should know that one of the most basic and rhetoric questions in Jewish theology is this question. Tzadik v'Rale, Rasha v'Tevle. Why is it that the righteous are suffering and that the evil seem to be living on the fat of the land? And there's a whole Sefer in Tanakh, which according to the Gemara is the oldest Sefer Tanakh ever written. It was written by Moshe Rabbeinu himself, called Sefer Iyov. The Gemara says that Iyov was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. And the whole book of Iyov is addressing the question, Tzadik v'Rale, why do bad things happen to a Tzadik? It's a question which will emotionally never ever be resolved. Intellectually, as they say in the culture, whatever. How do we understand it? How do we understand it? Then again, we're not speaking now Pnimiyas HaTorah, we're speaking strict Nigla. Push it, the Nigla the Torah. Teretz Hazeh. Tzaddik means a winner. In judgment, that's all. Tzaddik means you went into a court of law and you came out, they say in America, not guilty. Or as we would like to say, vindicated. Innocent, yeah? Rasha means a person who went into a court of law and he came out guilty. That's the only criteria. Tzadik Beinani Rasha Nigla the Torah means in judgment. Are you going to Gan Eden? Or are you going to Gehenim? Or are you going to sit in the fence until something happens to tip you one side or the other? That's Tzadik, that's Beinani, that's Rasha. Now, once we understand that this is the meaning of the word Tzadik, this is the meaning of the word Rasha, this is the meaning of the word Beinani, the V'Toivloi and the V'Ralei is easy to explain. How? Pashat. If a person is a tzaddik, that means he has 50% or more than 50% good. That means he has less than 50% or exactly 50% not good. So you have a pasuk in Torah, which I can't remember at the moment, where it says that the Eibishter will give a tzaddik Yisurim in this world, so when it comes to Gan Eden, it's good. So tzaddik. Tzaddik means you won your case. You are 50% or higher. The Rambam holds that exactly 50%, you consider the tzaddik. Okay? You won your case. You're going to Gan Eden. What about the fact that there's things about you that are not good? So Virale. The tzaddik goes through hardships in this world. The hardships in this world save him from the hardships on the other side. When he gets to the other side, he's whatever in chesrenis, iniquities that he had have been cleansed, and he goes straight to Gan Eden. That's the explanation of tzaddik v'ralei. Why is it tzaddik having a hard time? The Eibush is getting rid of whatever nyanim lo tevim he has. What's a tzaddik v'tevlei? A tzaddik for whom it is good. Tzaddik v'tevlei is tzaddik omer. If you never did any averis, there's no reason to have any nisyonis, no reason to have any yisurim in this life. So you have elam hazeh and elam haba. That's simple, not complicated. And the same is true with Rasha. A Rasha means a person who's less than 50% good, which means more than 50% evil. And if again, the Rambam writes that you get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more than 50-50. The judgment is in your favor. The 50-50, depending on what the Aveda is, 1 or 2 or 3, I think even 4. He brings a pasuk, the Rambam does, that up till 3 or 4, past 50 is still considered 50-50. Person's a Rasha, that means the majority of his actions are evil, he goes to Gehenna. So the pasuk says, Mishalem el seinav al ponav lahavide. The Eibishter pays the Rasha for his tzidkis, for his mitzvahs in this world, so that in Gehenna, when he goes to the other side, he has a clean slate. There's a Gemara by Ashmedai, Gemara Masechta Gittin, I think, that they were traveling, him with Yob and Yayoda, and they met a man, and Ashmedai helped him. Ashmedai was in chains. How do you hold a shed? How do you hold a demon in a chain? It's not exactly logical. How do you hold a shed in a chain? Because on the chain it said the Eibishter's name. And if he would tear the chain, he would destroy the Eibishter's name, which would be Echel Hashem, which he couldn't do. So he was in shackles, not because the chain was so strong, but because the chain had Eibishter's name. So he helped this man. And later on, when he was already in jail, Ben Yob and Yoda, who had captured him and brought him to Yerushalayim, and the Shlomo Melech came into him and asked him why he asked him about a whole bunch of anomalies, strange things he did along the trip. Why did you help this person? So he said, this man's a perfect Rosh. He wants to rip us one teva. So I paid him for it. That's what the Gemara says. Okay, this is the nigle of Tzaddik Bein Rasha, and it addresses the type Tzaddik V'Tevlei, Tzaddik V'Ralei, Rasha V'Tevlei, as they say in Yiddish, einfach. Very simple. That Tzaddik means you won your case. Tzaddik Gama means that there's no Avedas. Tzaddik She'ein Gama means you won your case, but you have Avedas. Rasha means you lost your case. Rasha Gama means you have only Avedas. Rasha She'ein Gama means you have mitzvahs also. And it ties right into this concept of Tzaddik V'Tevlei and Tzaddik V'Ralei, Rasha V'Tevlei and Rasha V'Ralei, which means begashmi. Tzaddik V'Tevlei means your life is materially good. Tzaddik V'Ralei means your life is materially challenged. And the same is true, Rasha V'Tevlei, Rasha V'Ralei. So the Alter Rebbe brings Motzina B'Gemara. We find in the Gemara, doesn't tell you a page. You know why? Because it's all over the Shas. This definition of tzaddik bein Rasha you have all over Shas. This is the standard nigla definition of tzaddik bein Rasha, like you see on the next page. It's simply a question of judgment. Okay, that was clear. Then the Rebbe brings the Gemara in Brachas. The Gemara in Brachas is a part of the Gemara. It's part of Shas. But the Gemara in Brachas leaves you confused. Because the Gemara in Brachas says things which seem to contradict these criteria. What does it say in the Gemara of Brachas? Tzadikim yetzatev sheftan chulu. Reshoim yetzerera sheftan. Beinim zevazeh sheftan v'chulu. Now we're not sure yet exactly what that means. Tzadik is judged by the Yetzatev, Rasha is judged by the Yetzirah, Beini is judged by both. You'll find out of Mitzvah Hashem when we get to Perek Yud Gimel. Okay? So this Gemara so far hasn't been helpful, but then comes a few more words. Amar Rabbi, said the Rabbi, you're talking about Rabbi Bar Nachmani. You know what Rabbi Bar Nachmani was? Rabbi Bar Nachmani was the judge, it was a machlokes between Kutchabrichu and Mesifta the Nekiah and Mesechta Baba Metzia. Machlokes between the Eibishter and the Bezdin Shalmaila about Amaisa Metasofik say I love and Kodma Beheres. Man Nechach Rabbi Bar Nachmani. It's the same Rabbi who had to negotiate, who had to psak, pasken halacha, the machlokes between Kutchabrichu and Mesifta the Nekiah. You understand? That's what Rabbi Bar Nachmani is. Rabbi Bar Nachmani said Tahir, and he passed away saying Tahir. You have in the Gemara two people like that. Rabbi Kiva was the same thing. Rabbi Kiva passed away, they said the word Tahir. The Gemara says, Ashrech Akiva, that you're Tahir, Nishmatcha B'Tahara. So Rabbi Nachmani was the same thing. He said Tahir and he died. But he said Tahir before he died. So he was a Neshama B'Guf, so he was able to pass Ken Shaila and resolve a machlekes between the Kutchabriuch and Mesifta Derekia. So Rabbi Bar Nachmani was not your local, what? Plumber. Yeah? I think we could agree that Rabbi Bar Nachmani was not a Poshet. Yeah? So the Rabbi Beinani. The Rabbi Bar Nachmani, the Rabbi Abaye, says, for example, I Beinani. So his Talmud Abaye right away says to him, Rebbe, if you're a Beinani, then there's nobody could live in this world. And again, we were Cheder Yinglach, and we learned Tanya. Everything was explained in simple words. That every generation has to have a tzaddik, and the tzaddik is called tzaddik Yisei Elam. Without the tzaddik, the world has no foundation. So Rabbi says to his Rebbe, if you're a Beinani, then there's no tzaddikim around. If there's no tzaddikim around, the world can't exist. That's how we were taught this Gemara in Cheder. Now here's the problem. This is the Gemara. It's a Gemara in Brachas. This is not a Zoyar, it's not Kabbalah, it's not Eitz Chaim, it's not Shara Kedush, it's a Gemara. And this Gemara goes in the face of everything we said before. Why? Because we said before, Matzina b'Gemara Heichalukas, what's a Beinani? 50-50. A Beinani is 50% mitzvahs, 50% Avedas, and his din is that Taylor. His suspended, his judgment hangs and waits for a schus, for something that's going to tip the scale in one direction or the other. So Rabbi Bar Nachmani calls himself a Beinani. And the Alter Rebbe says, this Gemara flies in the face of everything we said before. In other words, you'll see it inside. Right? The Alter Rebbe is going to say that Rabbi Bar Nachmani is wrong. There's no question that Rabbi Bar Nachmani made a mistake. Okay, there's no way to accept that Rabbi Bar Nachmani made a mistake. But Eichtar Rabbi Ba'atzmi Le'mishu Beinani. How could he have made such a mistake? You understand? A mistake has to be reasonable. You know, Anivis is not stupidity. And Rabbi Bar Nachmani wasn't a fool. Right? A person like Rabbi should call himself a Beinani, that means 50% Averis, that the Gemara says, you'll see it inside, when he had to die, he had to play a whole game to get him to stop learning, so he should take his neshama. Like David HaMelech, he never stopped learning for a minute, day or night. So the Rabbi is saying, I'm a Beinani, brings into question the Matzina b'Gemara Heichalukas. And that's how the Tanya opens. You understand? The Alter Rebbe is going to get us to the Rayim and the Pashas Mishpatim. And the Rayim and the Pashas Mishpatim is the Zohar. And frankly, we talked about the Zohar last time also. 2 weeks ago, I told you both. But as we're starting up today's Shir, this is where we're starting. We have Matzinu b'Gemara. We have the standard understanding all over Shas. What's a tzaddik, what's a Beinani, and what's a Rasha. And the Alter Rebbe is challenging this not with a Zohar. He's challenging this with another Gemara. Which part of the Gemara is especially disturbing to us, where Rabbi says, okay, I think that was clear. Now what we're going to do is going to keep on reading. If anybody wants to make any comment, you're welcome to. I just want to say that we'll go back to the Raya Mehemne, we'll go back to the Zohar when we're ready. Okay, the Revaile, we're learning Gemara. In other words, the Sefer Tanya Kaddish, which is a Sefer of Pnimiyas HaTeira, by the design of the Alter Rebbe, begins dafka with Gemaras. Okay, questions or comments? So let's go. Let's read. We're on the first page, middle of the page. The line that begins with the word v'chulu. It's a little bit after the middle of the page. Okay? Ulahavin kol zeh. We must understand all of the above. Be'er heitev. Well, now I'm cheating with you a little bit. You know why I'm cheating with you? I am cheating with you because we already learned that I am a Hemna. We already had the Zohar. But I forgot to repeat the Zohar. You understand? 2 Sundays ago when we learned last, we had the Zohar as well, but I forget something again, the Zohar. I just told you 2 Gemaras. The Zohar we're going to leave because because I want to. That's why, and I'm the teacher, do whatever I want. And I decided that we're skipping a Zayir. Here you are. Okay? So, we have two Gemaras. One Gemara is all over the Shas. One Gemara is all over the Shas. That Tzaddik Ben Nirash have to do with judgment. And the other Gemara is a Gemara in Brachas. So the Alter Rebbe says, Lahavin kol zeh be'er heiter. We have to understand all of the above well. And when Alter Rebbe says kol zeh, he means also the Zohar, but we're skipping that piece. But then he brings more Gemaras. In other words, you should know there's not only one Gemara which contradicts the rest of Shas. There's a bunch. You understand? The Gemara is very big. The Gemara is very big, yeah? It fits on a shelf and a half. It doesn't look very big. But everything in Gemara is written in half sentences, in a word or two. A line is a whole story in Shas. So in many places in Shas, Tzaddik Ben Nirash are discussed. And there is the standard definition, Tzaddik Ben Nirash, let's say it's 80% of the time. It's probably 90 or 95% of the time. But there's enough Gemaras to make you nervous. You understand? Enough Gemaras to say, wait, we're missing something. The classic Gemara that makes you nervous is the Gemara in Brachas, where Rabbi calls himself a Benyani, but there's others. And the Alter Rebbe, with his genius, quotes every Gemara in Shas, which creates a problem to the standard definitions. Vegam lahovin. So let's go through more Gemaras that are going to further challenge our understanding of Tzaddik Ben Nirasha based on the classic definitions of the Gemara. Masha Omar Iyeh, Baba Basa Pedek, of the first Pedek of Baba Basa, at the end of the Pedek. You have the whole Gemara on Iyeh, the story of Iyeh, and so on and so forth. And the Gemara says that Iyeh says that Rebbeinu Shalayla, master of the world, Brasa Tzadikim, Brasa Rishayim Chulu. You created some people to be Tzadikim, and you create other people to be Rishayim. What's the kasha? If Tzadik means somebody who wins his case, and Rasha means somebody who loses his case, which is the standard Nigla definition of Tzaddik, Beinani, and Rasha, how could Iyeh say that the Eibishter created some people to be winners and some people to be losers? V'ho, the Gemara says in Masechta Nideh, right? Which is very close to the Nideh with which the Tanya began, that before a baby is even conceived and born, a whole bunch of stuff is decided. One of the few things which isn't decided is Tzaddik v'Rasha leikoma. They decided if you're going to be rich or poor, smart or stupid, handsome or ugly, bunch of stuff, Fashidin is Achen, but it's not determined whether you're going to be righteous or evil. Why not? Hakal b'dei shivayim chutz me'yireh shamayim. The Eibush doesn't mix into free will. When it comes to Tzaddik and Rasha, a person is free. So how could Iyeh make a statement? The Eibush created some people to be Tzaddikim. The Eibush created some people to be Rishayim. What do you mean? Every single human being could be a Tzaddik. Why? Tzaddik v'Rasha leikama. The Eibush does not predetermine Tzidkis or Rishis. So it's not in the Eibish's hands whether someone's going to be a tzaddik or someone's going to be a rasha. Hypothetically, it's possible for everybody to be a tzaddik. Hypothetically, it's possible for everybody to be a rasha. How could the V'yah say, B'rasa tzaddikim, B'rasa rishayim? It's a good kasha. It's a very, very good kasha. If we define tzaddik and rasha, as we defined it up in Nigle, winning or losing your judgment, how could Iyeh say, as a matter of fact, B'rasa tzaddikim, B'rasa rishayim? Now you could answer, there's a Rambam that suggests, what do you mean? If you have enough people, you can have some tzaddikim, some rishayim. The Rambam writes up in the to the Mitzrayim that Hashem made the Mitzrayim enslave the Jews, and then He punishes them. You want Mitzrayim to enslave the Jewish people, so they're doing you a service. What are you punishing them for doing you a service? So the Rambam says, Eibush didn't say into only one mitzvah do it. He said to the nation, you have a choice. You don't have to participate. You chose, you're guilty. So the Raiva jumps on the Rambam and says, now what would happen if every single mitzvah decide not to listen to the Eibush? What would happen then? And it becomes freilich. Baruch Hashem, it's a freilich in Teirah, yeah? So you could negotiate out of this that Iyeh is not saying that the Eibishter created some people. The Eibishter created some people and took away their choice, they must be tzaddik. The Eibishter created some people and took away their choice and made them Rishayim. He's simply stating, as a matter of fact, some people be tzaddikim, some people be Rishayim. But just like that Raiva doesn't like that Rambam, the Alter Rebbe doesn't like that teretz. Bottom line is, Iyeh says Hashem created some people to be tzaddikim, some people to be Rishayim, if, underlined, we go with the Nigla definitions of Tzaddik, Beinani, and Rasha, it makes no sense. Okay? And you'll see later more Gemaras. V'gam, in addition to the kasha of the Gemara in Baba Basra, that Iyeh says that Eibush created some people to be tzaddikim, some people to be rishayim. And in the bottom of this page, you can have a number of other Gemaras which are going to further confuse us. Says the Rebbe, Lahavin Mahus Madregas Abeinani. We must understand the Mahus. The word Mahus is a very difficult word to translate in English. The word that I've chosen to use, because I think it's pretty good, although it's not good enough, is substance. Mahus Madregas Abeinani. The substance of the step of the level of Beinani. Shebavadai, it has to be clarified that it's impossible to say that it means half good and half evil. All over the Shas, a Beinani means 50-50. All over the Shas, a Beinani means 50-50. So the Alter Rebbe quotes Matzinu b'Gemara that a Beinani is 50-50, and then says, but it doesn't mean it. Why not? Because the Alter Rebbe is not defining Beinani in the narrow sense. He's saying Mahus Madregas Beinani. What is the substance of the level of Beinani? And his Raya is Vaitas Magamara. Again, not a Zoya, not a Zoya. Im Kei. If you're going to say that the term Tzadik Beinani Rosh, which are defining vindication or guilt and judgment, are the Mahus, are the essence of what the terms mean, Eich To Rabba Ba'atzmei, how could the Rabba have made that mistake, Leiman, to say Shu Beinani, that he's an intermediate, that he's in between. Chaim Miller's Tanya, he calls him an in-betweener, which is it's a good definition. He made up a word. In between. Nishtahei and Nishtahei. V'neida, because we know about this Rabbi Bar Nachmani, the Leposek Pum Megis. He never stopped learning for a minute. Right? The Gemara says in Shabbos that David HaMelech always was learning. And he asked the Eibishter, Hedieni Havaya Kitzi, tell me when I'm going to die. So the Eibishter says to David HaMelech, nobody knows Kitzi Ezmani, no one is told. Ein Makav Le'Odav, Ezmani, Tav Ezbeisei, and so on. So David HaMelech said, okay, what day of the week? So he told him Shabbos. So David HaMelech was very careful on Shabbos never to stop learning. When it came Shavuos Shabbos, when David HaMelech had to die, and the Malach HaMelech had a problem, and lost him Nishtzu. So there's a whole story in the Gemara how he got him to stop learning, and he took his life. David HaMelech. Rabbi Bar Nachmani, there's a Gemara in Ksubis with the boys who are learning about the Bishua ben Levi, that the Malach HaMelech came to him, he took his knife from him, and they had to negotiate to get his knife back. That's a Zananda Mais. But David HaMelech, the Gemara says that the only way the Malach HaMelech killed him was he played a game with him. He made noise, and David HaMelech wanted to see what it was, and he fell and he died. Rabbi Bar Nachmani was in that category. Yeah? The angel of death couldn't rule over him and take his life. So you're talking about a Yiddish that Rabbi made a mistake is not a question. There's no way when Rabbi says, I know Beinani, that's true. It's a lie. No way. Rabbi is nowhere near Beinani. The kasha is not why Rabbi said it. It's not even a nivis. It's stam babamaisis. You know, a yid, a big tzaddik should say I'm a Russia. What is the value of that? Who does it help? It doesn't help him. It doesn't help anybody else. It's sheker. Rabbi Bar Nachmani says I know Beinani. It's wrong. But if he said it, he meant something. In other words, Rabbi Bar Nachmani had a reason for saying this, and whatever the reason is, has to make some sense. It's not from a clap. Rabbi should make a mistake. The mistake has to be also within reason. You know, you have in Chazal two types of mistakes. You go to a Rav, the Rav Paskins the Shaila, and then the Rav proves to be wrong. Yeah? So what's the din? Is the Rav guilty? Does the Rav have to pay back? Or do you have to take the thing back to court? Reuven and Shimon are arguing over money. And the Rav Paskin wrong, and then they come along and they prove the Rav Paskin wrong. There's different kinds of mistakes. If you made a mistake in what's called the Dvar Mishneh, Torah Dvar Mishneh, you made a mistake about a Kvizd in the Shulchan Aruch, you go back to Bezdin, you Paskin again. But if you made a mistake in a Shikal Adas, if the mistake of the Rav was the kind of mistake that a Rav could make because his judgment was involved, what he said stands. There's a whole sugi in Shas about Keach Bezdin Yofa. Right? If Bezdin makes a mistake and then you run back and you fix it, you take away the whole Keach from the Dayanim. A mistake has to be reasonable also. It's wrong, but it makes sense that you would have made such a mistake. Frag the Alter Rebbe, Eich Ta, what kind of mistake is this? Rabbi should say 50% Averis. Doesn't make any sense. The Eich HaYayachal Lites Bi'atzmei. The Eich HaYayachal Lites, how could Rabbi have erred B'mechza Averis, Chas V'Sholem, with half Averis, if that's the definition of Beinani? So the Alter Rebbe says, for some reason, I don't know why, but he first brings the Gemara in Bava Basra, he brings Eiv, and then goes back to the Gemara in Brachas, right? I'm not going to say if we were writing the Tanya, because that's a foolish thing to say, but L'chayri, he should first finish with Rabbi, then he should bring Eiv, especially since later on he brings additional Gemaras. It's a tzarachin, but okay, we don't know the answer to that. Rabbi made a mistake, there's no question about it, but it has to be a reasonable mistake. And even if you're going to explain the Rabbi's mistake as a reasonable mistake, it's not reasonable that Rabbi was 50% Avedis. It's not reasonable. It has to mean something else. So here's a Gemara that's arguing against the Gemaras. The Gemaras that say that Tzaddik means judgment and Rasha means judgment and Beinoni means judgment is not sit at all, does not sit well at all with this story. Rabbi calls himself a Beinoni. So we have two rayas from the Gemara itself that bring into question the definitions of Tzaddik, Beinoni, Rosh. Or to use the word that the Rabbi uses, you could use the word Tzaddik for winning your case, you could use the word Rasha for winning your case, you could use the word Beinoni for being stuck in court, but not Mahus Madregas HaBeinoni. The substance of what a Tzaddik and a Beinoni Rasha are not accounted for in the Gemara definition. Why? There are two rayas. A rayah Magmara in Brachas, where Rabbi says, the Rabbi says, Kena not Beinoni, and a rayah Magmara in Bava Basra, where Eve says Hashem created some people to be tzaddikim and other people to be the shoy. Huh? It's clear. Lo magain weiter. V'gam. V'oid. Noch a rayah. B'shosh ois avenes nikre Rosh Gomer. A person does one aved is a Rosh Gomer. One aved. Now the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring sources, but there are such Gemaras. There are Gemaras that say you did one aved for that second, you call it a Rosh Gomer. Now I don't want to yet over here make ganze Nippapulim, but you will see in the Tanya, if you stick with us, right, for the next decade or so, as we journey through the Kuti Amarim, we have a special genius at using time with maximum efficiency. Use up as much of it as possible, you understand? Yeah, he doesn't quote a source, but it says, you'll have later in Tanya, that there's three concepts in an Aveda. There's three concepts in an Aveda. The first concept of the Aveda is the second that you commit the sin, the moment. The second concept of the Aveda is the fact that the Aveda lingers, that it leaves a pagam b'nefesh, leaves a mark on the soul. And the third concept of an Aveda is that an Aveda is l'mayla min hazman, it's above time altogether. In different places of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe addresses each of these three. But when it comes to the first idea, this second you did a wrong thing, this second you're Rosh Gomer. For this instant, for this moment you're Rosh Gomer. Now, there's also Gemara. And this Gemara is also inconsistent with the standard understanding of Rosh. You did one Aveda, you're Rosh. Do me a favor. 51% Aveda is you're Rosh. But if this second didn't Aveda, as far as this second is concerned, you call it Rosh Gomer. So weiter, a Gemara that brings into question the standard understanding of Tzaddik, Beinoni Rosh, all over the Shas. Number 4, and this is in a bracket. If you later do tshuva, nikre tzaddik gomer, boom, you're tzaddik again. You did tshuva, you're tzaddik. Now, when you say you did tshuva, you're tzaddik, what does that mean? You did one aveda, and the tshuva for that one aveda, you become a tzaddik? Nay. You did a lifetime of avedas. You did a lifetime of avedas. And in 1 minute you become a tzaddik. Right? What's the example for this? Every Lubavitcher Chassid knows this. This bracket. It's the tshuva from the Rishonim. I actually looked it up for somebody who bothered me about it. The Gemara says in Masechta Kedushin, it's brought in the Rambam. Yeah, a man is a Rosh Gomer. He's a complete Rosh, and he says to a woman, "Areyat Mekudeshes li b'taba'azu almanas shani tzaddik Gomer." A guy's a low life, a Rosh. He says to a woman, "Here's a coin, here's a dollar, here's a gold ring. You are married to me, you're betrothed to me, you're bound to me on the condition that I'm a perfect tzaddik." What's the halacha? So in one sheet it says she's married. Another sheet it says sofek mugareshes. To be married, not exactly, but to go marry somebody else, she can't. She's a get. And if she wants to marry a kohen later, she can't marry a kohen. She's a sofek gerush. Even though she was married to a Rosh Gomer on that night of the tzaddik gomer farvos. Shem hir tshuva believe. For a moment he thought a moment of tshuva at tzaddik gomer amaisa. In 1 second the guy does tshuva for a whole life. The Gemara says Bacha Rebbe v'yomer yesh misha kein elam b'shachas. In a minute you do tshuva on the Maisa with the Friedrich and Rebbe. It's a very interesting story. The Rebbe Peter by Fabrengen. The Friedrich was in Germany and he was sitting on the train leaving, and the community leadership of Germany was on the train seeing him off. And they were very pinklach, the Deutsche, very, very, very pinklach. So one of them looks at his watch and he says, "Nach geblieben eine Minute." There's 1 more minute until train departs. So the Friedrich Rebbe says, "Kemen allein gehabt on tshuva." It says, that's pretty painful there, yeah? Why? How many times did it ever say that? Tshuva is l'mayla min hazman. In many aspects, including the fact that it takes no time to do tshuva, yeah? Every mitzvah has a shiur. You have to do it for so long. You have to sit in the sukkah for so many seconds. You have to hold the lulav for so many seconds. And how many seconds you have to do tshuva? No time at all. No, eat your heart out. This is a halacha. This is not stam Gemara. This is a Gemara from which comes dinim. The din is a man who's a rasha gives a woman a ring and says, she needs a get, at least. She may be even married to him. Now, how do you explain that? If tzaddik means more than 50% good and rasha means more than 50% evil, the guy's a rasha merusha. In 1 minute he becomes a tzaddik because he likes a woman. Mitamol gevana tzaddik. Vaiter akash.
But he doesn't stay a tzaddik.
Huh?
He jumps right back to rasha.
Well, if you learn the Gemara superficially, he becomes a tzaddik gomer. Finish. Ois rasha. When he's going to come to the Bezdin Shalma, that's what's going to happen. This moment of tshuva is going to make him Mois Rosh, make him Tzaddik. It's very hard to understand. So there's another Gemara which brings into question the standard definitions. Right? Let's go weiter. Va'afilu, 5 lines from the bottom. Ha'eved ha'isr kal shel divrei sefer. There's a Gemara that says that if a person in his life never did an Aveda, except for one isr kal, whatever the word isr kal means, a small Aveda, which is midivrei seferim mikre rasha. He is called a rasha kedis beperik beis diavamis or perekama denida. Now the mashpiyim observe that it doesn't say nikra, it says mikra. The difference between nikra and mikra. Nikra is stronger and mikri is less strong. But I don't know those pshatim. I don't know those pshatim, and I don't think that Rabbi brings them here. So the idea that a rasha means more than 50% evil is debunked by this Gemara that says you do one Aveda Derabban and you call it Rosh. Now, 2 lines before the Alter Rebbe already said it, right? 7 lines from the bottom of the page, one Aveda makes you a Rosh. After the bracket, he repeats it again. Because before the bracket, he was talking about a Deraisa. After the bracket, he's talking about a Derabban. But you see that one Aveda makes you a Rasha, not 51% Avedas makes you a Rasha, even if it's Medivrei Sefer. And then we continue. If we're not talking about an Aveda of co-mission, we're talking about an Aveda of omission, right? You didn't do anything wrong. You missed an opportunity to do something right. So you missed an opportunity to do something right. Nikra Rasha v'perek vav d'shvuos. In the 6th Perek of Shavuos, you're called a Rasha for missing an opportunity to do a mitzvah say. Now, if a Rasha means more than 50% good, how are you calling a guy a Rasha for making one mitzvah? Now, wait, listen carefully. When you talk about a person missing a mitzvah, there's 2 things. A sin of commission means you're over and a lav. Hashem says don't, and you did. Okay. What's a sin of omission? Hashem said do, and you didn't do. Hashem said put on tzong, you didn't. Hashem said make kiddush, and you didn't. Hashem said sit in a sukkah, you didn't. Hashem said shake a lulav. Hashem said listen to Mikra Megillah, you didn't. That's a sin of omission. What is the most fine of all the avedas of omission? In other words, of all the things that Hashem tells you to do, that if you didn't do it, you're the least guilty, what would be the example? Stopping somebody else from doing an aveda. It's not about you, it's somebody else. Shimon is doing something wrong, and you can stop him, or at least you can protest. Misha yesh b'yadei limches. 3 lines from the bottom. You have an opportunity to stop somebody else from doing an aveda. V'lei mich, and you didn't stop him. Nikre rasha perek vav d'shvuos. So it's a sin of omission. For the first time, the Alter Rebbe mentions that you become a rasha not from doing something wrong. You become a rasha from missing to do something right. And what kind of something right? Or something right which is not even about you, it's about your neighbor.
What's commission?
Huh?
What's commission?
Commission means doing something wrong. Committing a sin. Omission means missing an opportunity to do something right. So until 3 lines from the bottom, it was all about sins of Aved. He did something wrong. Now he mentions you missed an opportunity to do something right, which has nothing to do with you. It's your friend. You could be Meicha and somebody else. You didn't Nikre Rosh. So how many Gemaras do we have over here? We have a Gemara in Brachas. We have a Gemara in Bava Basra. We have a Gemara in Kedushin, which the Alter Rebbe doesn't quote the source. No, you have a Gemara someplace else in Shas that you do one Aveda, you're already called a Rasha. Then you have the Gemara in Kedushin. You did Tshuva, you are a Rasha, complete Rasha, you did Tshuva, you become a Tzaddik. Then we have another Gemara, Eiver, Al Isir Kalshal Divrei Seifrim, which is the Gemara in Yevamis and the Nida, and then we have the Gemara in Shavuos. Six Gemaras. Each one in a different way brings into question the Matzinu b'Gemara Hechalukis, which we started last time. What's the Matzinu b'Gemara Hechalukis? All over the Shas. A tzaddik means more than 50% good. That's it. All over the Shas. A Rasha means more than 50% evil. We're talking about actions now. And all over the Shas, a Benyani means someone's 50-50. 50% good, 50% evil. So we have 6 Gemaras so far that say that doesn't work. The most important one is the Gemara in Brachas. Rabbi calls himself a Benyani. That's very hard to figure out. And then you have the Gemara that the Eiv says that some people credit to be tzaddikim, some people credit to be the Shad. That's also a problem. And then you have a bunch more, right? You do an Aveda, you're a Rosh. You do tshuva in a second, you become a tzaddik gomer. You could stop someone else, a sin of omission. You didn't do something right that affects another Jew, you become a Rosh. So you have a bunch of Eva is the culture divrei seifrim. You missed a derabon when you become a Rosh. And also Mishesh Libra 6 Gemaras. But now he brings a 7th Gemara. Second line from the bottom of the page, V'kolshkin l'kavachem, and how much more so, b'mevatel eiza mitzvah saseish efshelei l'kaima. If you do a sin of omission, you miss a mitzvah, but not you're missing a mitzvah that you have to help another Jew to do a mitzvah. Missing a mitzvah on you. Kemei, for example, if you're in a position to learn Torah, and you don't learn Torah, so the Rebbe brings a very, very sharp Gemara. The Gemara says about a Yid who could learn Torah. This is the Gemara Masechtas Sanhedrin. You miss a minute of learning Torah, you're shaming the words of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the hemshech of that pasuk is Hikoris Tikoris v'Gemer. I'm not translating. So now you have 7 Gemaras. Okay, if you're a mathematician, the first 5 can be negotiated as being about sin. 5 rayas that you become a Rasha with less than 51% avedis of doing something wrong. But the last 2 are about doing something right. You didn't do anything wrong, you just missed a mitzvah. The first one is missing a mitzvah of machor, and the second one is missing a mitzvah of bittul Torah. You have a total of 7 Gemaras that the Alter Rebbe brings. Some of them he quotes the sources. 3 of them he quotes the sources. Yeah, or 4 of them he quotes the sources. And the other 3 he doesn't even quote where it's written in Shas. 7 rayas that say, excuse me, the definition of tzaddik beini rosh, which is found in Rambam La'aloch and Hilchos Tshuva, which is all over the Shas, that a tzaddik means more than 50% good deeds. And a Rasha means more than 50% evil deeds. And a Benyani means 50-50. Klepnish. It doesn't work. These Gemaras create trouble. Or Pshita. And the Alter Rebbe finishes. And it's obvious, it's certain. The Mikra Rasha Tvei. And again, he says the word Mikri rather than Nikra. By a mitzvah saseh, he doesn't say Nikra, he says Mikri, whatever that means. You're considered more of a Rasha by being Mavatal Teira Me'eva Isid Rabban. If you did something that the Chachamim said not to do, and you're Mavatal Teira, what's the difference? One is the sin of commission, and the other is the sin of omission. Chachamim said don't, and you did. That's doing something you shouldn't have done. The Torah says do, and you didn't. Hashem says learn Torah, and you didn't learn Torah. So, Bichlal, everybody knows that a mitzvah leisa is worse than a mitzvah saseh, linyan einish. Right? If you don't do a mitzvah, there's no punishment. If you did naveda, there's a punishment, whether it's malchus, or it's a fine, or it's kodesh, it's einish. So a loisa says worse than an aseh. Says, but what about a mitzvah saseh deiraisa and a lav midrabanan? Where the chachamim say don't, when a Torah chachamim say don't, and the Torah says do. 2 different things. Bittul Torah on the one hand, and a lav different. For sure, missing out on a mitzvah saseh deiraisa is a bigger aveda than being an eiv and issa derabanan. So the Rebbe says that there are sins of omission. That means an Aveda where you didn't do anything wrong, but you missed an opportunity to do something right, which are worse than some other sins of commission. when it's a lav derabbanan, and a mitzvah deraisa, the asay of deraisa is more serious than the lav derabbanan. So the Alter Rebbe says, you become a Rasha without doing anything wrong. You become a Rasha, a bigger Rasha, and I don't mean you or me, we mean Shmedel and Bedel and Chayim and so on, by missing on the mitzvahs asay of Bittul Teirah. So Alter Rebbe says, now make a cheshbon. Rabbi was never mevatel Teirah. Kukin and Venik. Ve'im kain, accordingly, ar korchach, it must be said, ha-beinini ein be'yafilu of a Bittul Teirah. Not only has a bein never done any Averis, a beinini has never missed out on doing mitzvahs. Umishum hachi, and now we understand why Rabbi Taka made a mistake. Ba'atzmei, in himself, leimeshu beini, to say that it's beini. Of course Rabbi made a mistake. But the mistake makes sense. Why does the mistake make sense? Because in the Gemara, make believe there's no zayad. In the Gemara itself, there's enough contradiction to lead you to the following conclusion. And we're going to be a little bit skippy. Yeah? I'm going to jump ahead. There's something called Mehus Madreges Tzadik. Mehus Madreges Beinani. Mehus Madreges Rasha. We don't know what they are yet. But whatever Mehus means the substance of Madreges Tzadik. Mehus, the substance of Madreges Beinani. Mehus, the substance of Madreges Rasha. That's not about how many good deeds and bad deeds you have. It's about something else. We don't know yet what it is. But you don't need a Zoya to compel that. You don't need a Zoya to argue that. You find it in the Gemara itself. When you have a kasha from one Gemara on another Gemara, the teretz is, they're talking about different things, right? So the standard Gemara all over the Shas is that a tzaddik, beinin, nirash are defined by judgment. But there's another criteria for which we now have 7 Gemaras, that all say the standard definition of tzaddik, beinin, nirash break down. The Rabbi calls himself a Beinani is in contradiction of the standard of tzaddik, beinin, nirash. The Eiv says some people credit to be tzaddikim, some people credit to be rishoyim, breaks down the standard definition of tzaddik, beinin, nirash. And then the whole handful that the Rebbe brought, one Aveda makes you a rasha, second of tshuva makes you a tzaddik, Isli Divisef makes you a rasha, being Mishal Yes Limchas Lemicha makes you a rasha, Bittul Teirah makes you a rasha. What about the fact that Ba'alma could mean in the Welt, right? By people, Amadabar. But Ba'alma could also mean in Teirah, all over the Shas. What's meant Ba'alma? You pick Aramaic, Aramish, like I do. Alma. In the Welt, that everybody knows what's the Taicha Tzaddik, you won your case. What's the Taicha Rasha, you lost your case. So we have 7 Gemaras that bring into question the Matzinu b'Gemara Hechaluka is the standard understanding of Tzaddik Beinani Rasha. So Take. Okay, I get it. I understand. The Alter Rebbe scoured through the entire Shas and the entire Yerushalmi, whatever else he looked to, and he found 7 rayas against the Amrina and B'Yalma. Fine? So we have a problem. We have a contradiction in the Gemara itself. Before you get to any nisted, you have steers in the Gemara itself. So I get it. There's got to be another definition of Beinani Rasha. But once you have the second definition of Beinani Rasha, what do you do with the first one? If you understand that there's something called Mehus Madreges Tzadik, Mehus Madreges Beinani, Mehus Madreges Rasha, we don't know what that is yet, but we know that it's not 50-50, or under 50, or over 50, or exactly 50. It's something else. But what about the fact that all over the Gemara, and all over the Alma, they define it this way? So let's read weiter. The fact that in the Welt, and in the Shas, Mechza mikre beinani, 50-50 calls you beinani. V'reiv zoch is mikre tzaddik, and you have 51% good, you're already a tzaddik. And that's the standard Nigla definitions, and I'm repeating this again. This is what the Rambam writes in Hilchas Tshuva Halacha. This is the din. More than 50% good, you're called a tzaddik. So the Alter Rebbe says the teretz is hu shem hamushal. It's a borrowed term. You're calling him a tzaddik because he's a winner. You're calling him a rasha because he's a loser. But it's not Mehus Madreges Tzaddik. Mehus Madreges Rasha. Mehus Madreges Bein. Now remember, we know about the Zohar, but we're making believe we forgot. This is completely Gemaras against Gemaras. You understand? The Alter Rebbe already brought us that I am a Hemne. But let's make believe we forgot that I am a Hemne. This is Gemaras against Gemaras. So the Alter Rebbe says like this. There's two uses of the words. Tzaddik ben Yirash. Maybe there's more than two, but for us there's two. One use of the words Tzaddik ben Yirash is called borrowed. You borrow the word Tzaddik, you borrow the word Rasha, you borrow the word Beinani. Why? So Alter Rebbe continues, Le'inyan schar ve'einish. When it comes to the question of reward and punishment, lefi, because the halacha is, this is the din in Nigla de Teda, and like I said to you before, this is what the Rambam brings. Shenidu nacharube. A person is judged by the majority of his actions. Umikrit tzaddik bedina. You call this person a tzaddik not because he is muhus madreges tzaddik. He's nothing to do with muhus madreges tzaddik. You're calling him tzaddik as a borrowed term me'achar shezeiche bedin, because he wins his case. Now this is a chiddush nifla. The Alter Rebbe overturns common knowledge. The Alter Rebbe overturns what everybody knows. Go to a Yid and ask him what's a tzaddik, that he goes to Gan Eden. How do you get into Gan Eden? 51% mitzvahs in Gan Eden. It's a Gemara. We're in the Gemara all over the Shas. Wherever you look. So Alter Rebbe says, you're right. The Rambam Taka calls a tzaddik someone who goes to Gan Eden because it's 51% good. And all over the Shas you have reference after reference and case after case where a person has more than 50% good is called tzaddik. It's true. We use the word. But it's not Mahus Madreges Tzaddik. It's Shem HaMusha. We're borrowing the word. We're borrowing the word for one reason. If you define a person's status by whether they go to Gan Eden or to Gehenim, then you call him Tzaddik and Rosh. Avo, to be sure, however, Le'inyan Amitas Shem HaTeir. If you want to know a word, which is Shem HaTeir, which truly describes what Tzaddik is, what truly describes what the Rosh is, or to use the term we had on the previous page, Mahus Madreges Tzaddik. Muhus madregas Rasha, Muhus madregas Beinani, says the Rebbe Omre Razai have in Medrash. Weiter nicht Zayar, nicht Kabbalah, instead of Nigel the Teda. Tzadikim Yetzetev Sheifta. But Tzadik is judged only by his Yetzetev. Now, where'd you have these words last? Tzadikim Yetzetev Sheifta. On the previous page. But on the previous page it said Tzadik Yetzetev Sheiftan Chulu. Here the Alter Rebbe says what comes, you know what Chulu means? That there's words missing. When you quote a Gemara and you paraphrase, so every time you skip words, you put in a chulu, so the reader knows you skipped words. Look on what does it say here? Shenema. This is words from the Gemara, the same Gemara in Brachas, which was the beginning of our controversy. What is the raya that a tzaddik is judged by his yetzatev? Shenema. David HaMelech says, "My heart is halil." Most people have levavi with two bases. Why levavi with two bases? Yetzatev Yisrara, David Melech has libi with one base. My heart is hollow. Why? She'ein le Yetzer. David had no Yetzer Hara anymore. Ki Hara B'tainis, he murdered it. He killed the Yetzer Hara B'tainis. This is the same Gemara in Brachas. You see on the previous page, I'll put a chulu. Now he tells you what the chulu is. So again, you have a Rayif Magamara. There's no Zayat here. This is a Rayif Magamara. That we do use the word Tzaddik Bein Rasha to represent judgment, but you should know that the use of the word Tzaddik Bein Rasha represents judgment, which are all over the Shas, are borrowed. You're calling him a Tzaddik because he's a winner. You're calling him a Rasha because he's a loser. How good do you have to do to be a winner? Huh? Just better than your opponent. Right? Two sides go to war. Yeah, who wins? Everybody loses. The winner lost less. The winner can afford to lose less. That's all. It's a lose-lose. You're a winner because the other guy gave up. Doesn't want to lose anymore. That's all. So you have Tzaddik Bein Yiracha B'Shem HaMushal, borrowed terms. And this is the Ba'alma. This is all over the Shas. This is in the Rambam. La'alocha l'maiseh. That a Tzaddik is more than 50% righteous. Good. Aval, but considering the 7 Gemaras we quoted, and Mistamed is more, but these 7 Gemaras, particularly the first one, the Gemara in Brachas, where it says Tzaddik Eitatev Sheiftan Shenem Avali Bichol B'Kirbi. There's no other way to explain this Gemara. You know, in the Mefarshim it gets sticky. You look up this Gemara in Brachas, with the Li Bichol B'Kirbi, the Marsha, for example, doesn't necessarily explain what Alter Rebbe does. What Alter Rebbe says means the guy has no Yetzer Hara. Finished. No Yetzer Hara. Le'inyin. I will call me any person. Shalei Yigil Madregezu. If you haven't reached this level, where you have no Yetzer Hara, even even if his mitzvahs are more than his averis. Hedveter eine b'mailis u'madreges tzaddik klal. The level and the step of tzaddik he has nothing to do with. We call him a tzaddik, and he doesn't have a clue what a tzaddik is. Why not? Because he's a tzaddik in a borrowed way. He's a tzaddik in the fact that he's vindicated. He's a tzaddik in the fact that he's going to Gan Eden. That's it. But Amitis Shemateir, the Maila of Muhus Madreges Tzaddik is a whole other thing. And we know this from a Gemara against a Gemara. That's what the Alter Rebbe wants to do. He wants to start the Tanya by showing you that this that says in Zayar, which we're going to get to Mitzvah next week, or 2 weeks from next week is Purim, Adal Yada, is based on Gemaras. Sheneman. That's why it says in a Gemara in Medrash. He calls it a Medrash, but I think it's a Gemara. Yeah? It's a Gemara in Masechta Brachas. And he calls it a Medrash because it's part of Agoda. Roa Kadosh Baruch Hu betzadikim shehem moatim. The Eibush sees that tzadikim are very, very few. You know, it's a Gemara in Yuma Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, as they state on the Rebbe's Rishimas. Okay? Omar v'shofan b'chol deir v'deir v'cholu. So the Eibush planted that there should be at least one tzaddik in every generation. Or Kameshikosav, as the Pasuk says, v'tzaddik yisei deil. The world needs a foundation. And the foundation of the world is a tzaddik. And every generation there's a tzaddik. Okay? So, what did we learn today? We continued last week's class. But in contrast to what we did last time, where we contrasted the Gemara with the Zohar, we ignored the Zohar completely. We simply established Gemaras against Gemaras. We have 7 Gemaras, 4 which are quoted by source, right? Brachas and Bava Basra and Shvuis and Yevamis and Nida. Shvuis and Yevamis, Nida and Yevamis go together. Where he proves it from quoting a source, and 3 Gemaras which are quoted without a source. One is a Gemara in Kedushin, and one is Sanhedrin, the other one I don't know. That all prove that Tzaddik Bein Rasha can't possibly be what it's Aminin and Ba'alma. They all prove that Tzaddik Bein Rasha can't possibly be what it says in the Rambam when it comes to judgment. Okay? Questions or comments?
You touched on it, but could you just like a little bit help us understand? Most of us think that a tzaddik is born a tzaddik. How does that? He was given a neshama of a tzaddik.
Okay.
Did you say David Hamel? But I don't know.
You have a David Hamel get there by working on it.
Or the whole thing. How do you just?
Could we leave this for next time?
Yeah,
in other words,
sure.
I'll tell you the answer in a sentence. I'll tell you the answer in a sentence, but it's a discussion for a different time. First of all, what you just said is the Gemara Iyv. B'rasa tzadikim, b'rasa reshoyim. Means some people created to be tzadikim. We think of a tzaddik as a rebbe. That's a misnomer. A rebbe is not in the ballpark. A rebbe is a different situation. A rebbe is he's on the Eibishter's team. You understand? He's part of that program. A tzaddik is a servant of Hashem, just like a Benyus is like a Rosh. And yeah, he's born with the potential to become a tzaddik. But guess what? He can become a Rosh too.
Oh, that's
A
right.
tzaddik makes himself to a tzaddik. The concept, the problem that we have is we have a simplification of what a tzaddik is. In our mind, what's a tzaddik? A rebbe. A rebbe is another situation. But a tzaddik is born in such a tzaddik sheni gomer. A person is born a tzaddik and he's stuck in some level of any gomer. Okay, so we'll take a break.